I'm Nora Whitman. I'm 28, and the last thing I remember before hitting the ground at my graduation was searching the crowd for my mother's face. My name had just been called. The applause around me was rising, and everyone else seemed to have someone standing, waving, crying, recording the moment. I had a cap on my head, a master's gown on my shoulders, and a smile I had forced into place after weeks of running on almost no sleep. Then my chest tightened, my vision blurred, and the stage lights started to melt into each other. I took one step forward and everything went black. When I opened my eyes again, I wasn't holding a diploma. I was lying in a hospital bed with wires stuck to my skin and a machine counting every shaky heartbeat like it wasn't sure I'd keep going. A doctor told me they had called my emergency contacts more than once. No one came. No one answered. A little later, when I reached for my phone, I saw a tagged photo waiting for me. It was a smiling family picture taken that same afternoon, and the caption said, "Family Day without the drama." I didn't cry. I didn't even move. I just stared at it until something inside me went completely still. A few days later, while I was still too weak to stand for long, my phone lit up with 75 missed calls and one text that changed everything. It said, "We need you. Answer immediately." I blocked the number. Then I did something none of them saw coming. But before I tell you what I posted and why that message was the worst mistake my family ever made, tell me what time it is where you are right now and where you're watching from. I want to know how far this story reaches tonight. I grew up in Greendale, Missouri, the kind of town where people smiled at you in the grocery store and then talked about your family in the church parking lot 10 minutes later. From the outside, our house looked warm and orderly. My mother, Diane Whitman, kept the porch swept, the kitchen spotless, and the family photo wall updated like proof that everything inside those walls was healthy and loving. But even as a little girl, I knew there were two sets of rules in that house. My younger sister Lila was delicate, special, emotional, artistic, the one who needed understanding. I was capable, mature, dependable, the one who could handle disappointment. That language sounds harmless until you grow up inside it. Harmless words can become cages. By the time I was 7, I was packing my own lunches, braiding Lila's hair when my mother ran late, and clearing dinner plates while my father, Ron, laughed at whatever story Lila was telling from school. If Lila cried, the whole house stopped. If I cried, my mother would look at me like I had created an inconvenience nobody had time for. One of my clearest memories is from 5th grade, the day I won first place at a regional science fair. I had spent weeks building that project at the kitchen table, cutting cardboard, labeling diagrams, and staying up past bedtime to make sure every line was perfect. My mother promised she would be there when they announced the winners. She never came. She took Lila across town instead, because Lila had a pageant dress fitting and apparently that could not be moved. I stood there holding a blue ribbon nearly as long as my arm while other girls hugged their parents and took smiling pictures. When I got home, the ribbon was still in my hand. My mother looked at it for maybe 2 seconds and said, "That is nice, honey, but can you help your sister with her shoes?" Another time, Lila knocked over a framed wedding photo of our grandparents while running through the hallway. The glass shattered everywhere. My mother walked in, saw the mess, saw Lila already crying, and turned to me without asking a single question. "Nora, honestly, you are older. You should have been watching her." I remember kneeling on the floor picking glass out of the carpet while Lila sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket like she was the injured one. And when I got sick, really sick, it was the same story. I was 10 with a fever so high I could barely lift my head, but my parents still left for one of Lila's dance competitions because she had worked so hard and they did not want her stressed before going on stage. My mother left a can of soup on the counter and said there was medicine in the cabinet if I needed it. I watched their car disappear from the driveway through the living room window and understood something no child should understand that young. If I needed comfort, I was expected to survive without it. If Lila needed attention, the entire world moved for her. That was the real education of my childhood. Love, in our house, was not given by need or fairness. It was assigned by rank, and I had been ranked second for as long as I could remember. By high school, the roles in our family were set so deeply that nobody even bothered pretending otherwise. Lila was beautiful, impulsive, reckless, and somehow always one excuse away from being forgiven. I was the reliable one, which sounded flattering to people outside the family and felt like a life sentence inside it. If Lila forgot an assignment, my mother blamed stress. If she skipped class, my father said teenagers make mistakes. If I got a 96 instead of 100, my mother asked what happened to the other 4 points. The moment that changed something in me happened during junior year. Lila had gone to a party outside town and taken my father's pickup without permission. She clipped a mailbox, sideswiped a parked car, and came home shaking hard enough to make the kitchen chair rattle under her. I remember the look on my mother's face. She was not angry at Lila. She was calculating. Within minutes, she had decided what needed to happen, and somehow what needed to happen was me. "You are the one with the clean record," she said in a low, urgent voice. "If this follows Lila, it could hurt her college options. She is fragile right now. We cannot let one stupid mistake ruin her future." My father stood by the sink with his arms crossed and would not look at me. Lila was crying into a dish towel. And there I was, 16 years old, staring at 3 people who were supposed to protect me, while they built a lie and expected me to climb inside it. When the local officer came by to take a statement, I said I had been the one driving. He looked at me for a second longer than I wanted him to, like maybe he knew something was off. But he wrote it down anyway. Nobody thanked me after he left. My mother just exhaled and said, "Good. That is handled." That was the night I realized I was not treated like a daughter in that house. I was treated like a solution. A few months later, my school counselor, Mrs. Keller, noticed I was spending nearly every afternoon in the library long after activities ended. One day, she sat across from me and asked a question so simple it broke something open. "Nora, when are you happy?" I did not know how to answer her, not because I had never been happy, but because I had spent years being useful instead of honest. She was the first adult who looked at me and saw exhaustion instead of strength. She encouraged me to apply to colleges far from Missouri, somewhere I could build a life that belonged to me. I landed on Seattle almost by accident the first time, just scanning programs late at night while everybody slept. Then I found the speech and hearing sciences track and kept reading until sunrise. The idea of helping children find words, helping families communicate better, felt almost painfully personal. I applied in secret, got accepted with aid, and told my parents only after the numbers made it real. My mother reacted exactly the way I should have expected. "Seattle. Why would you move that far? Who is going to help around here? Your sister still needs stability." I wanted to say I had needed stability my whole life, and nobody had ever reorganized anything for me. Instead, I stood there gripping my acceptance packet so hard the edge left a dent in my palm and said I was going. My father muttered something about remembering where I came from. My mother cried for one evening, not because she was losing me, but because she was losing control of what I could be used for. The morning I left Greendale, my suitcase was heavier than it should have been, and my hope was embarrassingly naive. I told myself distance might fix everything. I told myself if I became successful enough, accomplished enough, impressive enough, my mother would finally look at me the way she looked at Lila. I did not know yet that some people never change their sight. They only change the distance from which they watch you suffer. Seattle felt like another country compared to Greendale. It was gray and expensive and fast and full of people who minded their own business in a way that felt almost luxurious. I loved it immediately, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. I started classes, picked up a dawn shift at a coffee shop near campus, tutored undergraduates in the evenings, and spent weekends doing observation hours at a speech clinic when I could get them. My apartment was small enough that I could touch the counter from the couch if I leaned far enough, but it was mine. Or at least it felt like the beginning of something that might become mine. I lived carefully. I tracked every dollar, skipped buying anything I did not absolutely need, and learned how to stretch soup for 3 meals. But somehow, my money never really stayed with me. My mother always had a reason. The water heater broke. Your father fell behind on a payment. Lila needed help with rent because her roommate moved out. Lila needed help with books. Lila needed help with a deposit. Lila needed help because somebody was always doing something unfair to Lila. At first, I sent what I could, because I still thought that was what good daughters did. Then it became a pattern so normal I stopped recognizing it as exploitation. My mother never sounded ashamed when she asked. She sounded entitled, softened by just enough praise to keep me obedient. You have always been the dependable one, Nora. You know how to make things work. I hate asking, but family is family. I can still hear the sweetness in her voice the first time she asked me to email her copies of my driver's license and a document with my signature on it. She said she was organizing old family paperwork after my grandmother's estate closed and needed matching ID for a bank file that had once listed me as a beneficiary. It sounded boring and administrative, the kind of thing nobody lies dramatically about because the lie is too small to notice. So I sent it. I did not think twice. Why would I? By then, trusting my mother with pieces of myself had become muscle memory, even if every time I did it I lost a little more ground. Lila drifted from job to job and interest to interest. 1 month she wanted to be a makeup artist, then a wellness coach. Then she was convinced she could build some online brand if she just had the right wardrobe, the right camera, the right car. My mother treated all of it like potential. My practical choices, meanwhile, were never celebrated unless they could be shown off to someone else. When I finished my undergraduate degree, my mother posted about me online before she even called. She wrote paragraphs about how proud she was, how our family had always valued education, how blessed she felt to have raised such driven daughters. I stared at that post from my phone while standing outside the lecture hall, where I had just turned in my last final and felt something hot and humiliating crawl up my neck. She loved my accomplishments most when they improved her image, not when they cost me sleep, or money, or health. Not when they happened in private. I went straight into graduate school because it was the next necessary step for the work I wanted to do. By then, I was helping pediatric patients during clinical rotations, sitting on tiny chairs in bright therapy rooms, celebrating with children over sounds and syllables most adults said without thinking. I loved that work so much it scared me. It was the first thing in my life that felt like purpose instead of survival. But my family still knew how to reach through a screen and turn purpose into pressure. Every transfer I made home came with the same old promise in my own head. Just one more time, just until they stabilize. Just until Lila gets on her feet. But Lila never got on her feet. She just learned exactly how hard she could lean on me before I broke. Graduate school was when the outside of my life started to look impressive, and the inside of it started to rot. I was in my master's program for speech-language pathology, doing clinic hours, handling coursework, writing evaluations, and taking evening shifts at a pediatric rehab center because tuition did not care how tired I was. On paper, I was building something meaningful. In my body, I was falling apart. I started waking up with my jaw clenched so hard it hurt to chew. My hands shook when I typed reports too quickly. Some afternoons I would climb one flight of stairs and have to stop halfway because my heart was racing like I had sprinted across the city. I blamed coffee, then stress, then weather, then anything except the truth. The truth was that I had been abandoning myself for so long it no longer felt dramatic. It felt normal. Around that time, Lila decided she needed a leased SUV because she was entering a new phase of life, which in Lila's language usually meant she was about to set money on fire and call it self-investment. She wanted something polished enough to impress people online and expensive enough to make it seem like success had already happened. My mother called me while I was charting after a long day and spoke in that falsely calm voice she used when she was setting a trap. "It is just temporary paperwork," she said. "They need proof the family can stand behind Lila. Nothing major. We are all putting our names where needed." I told her I could not co-sign anything. Not now. Maybe not ever. She sounded offended by the boundary before it had even fully left my mouth. "Nobody is asking you to make a big deal out of this, Nora. We just need a few documents. You always make things harder than they need to be when your sister is under pressure." That sentence followed me for days. When your sister is under pressure. As if pressure only counted when it belonged to her. Not when it sat on my chest at 3 a.m. while I revised a treatment plan. Not when I skipped groceries to send money home. Not when I sat in my car after work once because I was too dizzy to trust myself to drive right away. Maya Torres, a fellow clinician at the rehab center, noticed before anybody in my family ever would have. Maya had the kind of honesty that came wrapped in warmth. One evening, she watched me spill my water bottle because my fingers would not close properly around it and said, "Nora, this is not normal tired. This is the kind of tired people collapse from." I laughed because the alternative was listening. A week later, one of my professors said something in seminar that stayed with me longer than any lecture content from that term. "If you give until your body revolts," she said, "that is not compassion. That is self-abandonment, dressed up as loyalty." I wrote the phrase down and stared at it in my notebook for almost a full minute. Self-abandonment. Nobody had ever named my life so precisely. The week before graduation was a blur of final presentations, clinic deadlines, makeup hours, paperwork, and the constant hum of family demands that somehow got louder whenever I was closest to something important. My mother called to discuss travel plans for the ceremony, but even that conversation twisted around Lila. She complained that Lila had had a stressful month, that Lila needed something light and fun after all she had been through, that I should not expect too much emotional energy from anyone because graduation weekends are hectic. Then, just 3 days before my ceremony, Lila sent me a string of frantic messages about overdue payments tied to the SUV situation. She was already behind. There were fees. She swore it was not her fault. My mother followed within minutes, urging me to transfer money to stop everything from spiraling before the ceremony ruined the mood for everyone. I sent more than I could afford because I was exhausted and conditioned and stupidly hopeful in that old familiar way. That night I stood in my bathroom under unforgiving light and barely recognized my own face. My skin looked dull. My eyes were shadowed. I felt hollowed out from the inside, like someone had scooped out everything solid and left only momentum standing. I remember gripping the edge of the sink and whispering, "Just get through graduation." I said it like a prayer. I said it like finishing one more milestone would somehow buy me the rest that had been postponed for years. What I did not understand then was that my body had already heard enough promises from me. It was done negotiating. Graduation morning looked beautiful in the cruel way important days often do. The sky over Seattle was clear, the air cool, and the campus lawn was packed with families holding flowers, signs, cameras, and the kind of joy that makes you feel more alone when you are missing the people who should have brought it for you. I had my cap pinned in place, my gown zipped up, and a smile prepared for photos nobody in my family had actually earned. My mother texted 15 minutes before the ceremony started. "Traffic is terrible. We are still coming. Go ahead and sit down. We will be there before your name is called." I read it 3 times and chose to believe it because I had spent my whole life choosing belief right up until the second it humiliated me. The ceremony began. Speeches blurred, names rolled forward. I kept glancing toward the seats behind the main aisle, searching for my mother's hair, my father's shoulders, Lila's bright clothes, any sign that this one day might finally be different. There was nothing. Just strangers cheering for people who were loved out loud. When my name was called, something inside me tried to rise on habit before my body had agreed to it. I stood. The applause around me sounded muffled, like I had been dropped underwater. My vision narrowed. I remember thinking that the stage seemed farther away than it had a second earlier. I remembered taking one step and feeling my heartbeat slam hard against my ribs, then scatter. The next step never really happened. The ground came up too fast. When I woke, the light above me was hospital white and pitiless. There were monitors beside the bed, adhesive against my skin, fluid dripping through an IV, and a doctor speaking in a calm voice that did not match how frightened his eyes looked. Severe exhaustion, dehydration, cardiac irregularities likely triggered by chronic stress and sleep deprivation. He spoke gently, but every word landed like a receipt my body had finally forced me to read. The first question I asked was whether my mother had come. He hesitated in a way that told me the answer before he said it. "We called your emergency contacts several times," he explained. "We did not reach anyone willing to come in." Willing. That word cut deeper than unavailable ever could have. A few hours later, when the room was quieter and the medication fog had thinned enough for me to hold my phone properly, I unlocked it and saw the tag. A photo. My mother, my father, and Lila, standing near the waterfront. All 3 of them smiling into late afternoon sunlight like they were starring in an ad for family happiness. There were drinks in their hands. My mother's head was tilted toward Lila. My father looked relaxed. The caption under it read, "Family Day without the drama." For a long time, I did nothing except stare. I did not cry. Crying would have meant I was still asking them to be different. Instead, something colder and cleaner moved through me. Clarity. I lay there with wires on my chest and bruises beginning beneath the IV tape, and understood, finally, without excuses to soften it, that my mother had not missed my graduation. She had abandoned it. She had abandoned me, and not because of a crisis, not because she could not help it, because she preferred a peaceful day with the daughter she actually wanted over a difficult moment with the daughter she only used. That realization hurt, but not in a chaotic way. It hurt like a door clicking shut. Quiet. Final. 3 days later, still in that hospital bed, still too weak to stand for long without feeling the room tilt, my phone erupted with missed calls, 75 of them. Then came the message from my mother. "We need you. Answer immediately." I looked at those words and felt the old version of me disappear for good. I knew before I called back that it was not concern driving them. Concern had already had its chance and chosen a lakeside photo instead. Need was all that was left, and in my family, need had always meant they were about to reach for me, like I was an object they kept on a shelf until something broke. This time, I did not move blindly. I asked Maya to come by after her shift, and I set up a video consult with an attorney named Ben Keller, who had been recommended through the hospital social services office once I explained there might be fraud involving my name. Then I started reading. The missed calls, the messages, the voicemails. Buried inside the panic was the story they had not meant to tell me clearly. Lila had crashed the SUV she was never supposed to have in the first place. There were damages the insurance did not fully cover, questions about the lease, late payments already on record, and one very serious problem. A guarantor signature had been used to secure part of the agreement. Mine. Not with my permission. Not with my current knowledge. Mine. They had used my identification information, an old signature scan, and just enough of my employment history to build a lie around my name and hope they could keep me trapped long enough to finish it. I sat there reading those messages with my hospital blanket over my legs and a pulse monitor still clipped to my finger and thought, even now, even after I collapsed, even after the doctors called, I am still just paperwork to them. When I finally returned the call, I put it on speaker with Maya sitting beside the bed and Ben listening quietly through my laptop. My mother answered on the first ring, already crying. "Nora, where have you been?" "We were worried sick." My father cut in right behind her and demanded to know why I had ignored the family during an emergency. For a second, I almost laughed because the hypocrisy was so complete it felt unreal. Instead, I asked one question in the calmest voice I had maybe ever used with them. "When the hospital called and said I had collapsed at graduation, why did none of you come?" Silence. Then my mother tried to step around it. "This is not the time for that. Your sister is in serious trouble. Your father said the bank needs your confirmation. You just need to sign a few things and clear up a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding. I remember looking down at the bruise on my wrist from the IV and thinking that language was my entire life with them. Neglect became busyness. Theft became a misunderstanding. Exploitation became family. I told them I had already spoken with an attorney. My mother stopped crying. My father's voice went sharp. "Do not start overreacting, Nora. Families help each other." Lila got overwhelmed. "We all made choices under pressure. You are the only one who can fix this." There it was, the sentence I had heard in one form or another since I was a child. You are the only one who can fix this. The vase, the truck, the rent, the bills, the lies, the image. Their peace had always been built on my willingness to disappear into the repair. Not this time. I told them no. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just no. I said I would not confirm any document I had not signed knowingly. I said any further use of my information would be treated as fraud. I said the doctors had called my emergency contacts while I lay unconscious, and my mother had still chosen a caption over a hospital room. Then I said the truest thing I had ever said to them. You did not raise a daughter. You trained a backup plan. My mother gasped like I had slapped her. My father started shouting that I was ungrateful, unstable, selfish, that I was destroying the family over one bad weekend. One bad weekend. That almost impressed me. The way people who hurt you the longest always try to shrink the timeline once you stop cooperating. I let him finish. Then I said, this is the first emergency in my life that will not become my responsibility. I ended the call before they could reshape my words into guilt. After that, everything moved quickly in a way it never had when I was the one doing the labor. Ben sent formal notices. I removed my name from every account, document, and remaining shared utility I could find. I froze my credit. I filed reports where I needed to. I also made one public post, and I wrote it carefully. I did not rant. I did not insult anybody. I simply stated that I had been hospitalized after collapsing at graduation, that no family member had responded to emergency calls, and that I had discovered financial documents tied to my identity that I had not authorized. Then I asked that no lender, dealership, bank, or mutual acquaintance contact me through my family regarding any obligation in my name. That was it. Calm, factual, unignorable. The post moved through Greendale faster than gossip ever had when it only belonged to me. People who had watched my mother perform family devotion for years suddenly had a very different picture. She lost her seat on a church committee she cared deeply about. The dealership pulled back hard once legal questions surfaced. Lila lost the SUV, then lost the version of herself she had been trying to sell to the world. My father had to liquidate things he once bragged about owning to help cover the mess. And from what I later heard through distant relatives, the house itself came under serious financial strain once my name stopped cushioning their bad decisions. That was the part revenge stories never tell honestly enough. The most satisfying justice is often not explosive, it is structural. It is what happens when the person everyone was using finally walks away and the system collapses under the weight of its own greed. My family sent emails for months, some angry, some manipulative, some dressed up as apologies without ever containing the words "we hurt you." I read a few and then stopped. Healing did not require fresh access to the people who had nearly killed my sense of self. My real life began slowly after that. I stayed in therapy. I learned that boundaries are not cruelty. They are self-respect with a spine. I reduced my hours until my body stabilized, then rebuilt carefully. Maya became my emergency contact officially, and later one of my closest friends. I finished recovering. I took a full clinical role. I moved into a better apartment with light in the mornings and enough quiet to hear my own thoughts without panic chasing them. Eventually, I started a small weekend support circle for educators and clinicians dealing with burnout, because I had learned something the hardest possible way. People praise self-sacrifice right up until it sends you to the hospital. Then they act shocked by the damage they helped normalize. If there is one educational lesson in my story, it is this. Being the strong one does not mean enduring mistreatment until you collapse. Loving your family does not require abandoning yourself. And helping people is only noble when it is chosen freely, not extracted through guilt, fear, or conditioning. The most valuable lesson I carry now is one I wish someone had taught me when I was 10 years old, with a fever on the couch, waiting for a car that never turned back into the driveway. You are allowed to protect your peace before your body is forced to beg for it. About a year after my collapse, I attended another graduation on campus. This time, I was in the audience for one of the children I had worked with, now older, speaking clearly and confidently in a way that once felt impossible for him. His mother cried when he finished, and he ran straight into her arms. I sat there watching them and pressed a hand lightly against my chest, feeling a heartbeat that sounded steady and normal, and finally mine. I did not miss my family in that moment. I missed the idea of what family should have been, and then I let even that go. Because losing them was not the tragedy I used to think it was. The real tragedy would have been staying.